what we hope to do, or should we just talk about it? I'm happy either way.
I will be happy to listen the book from you. And while you are reading the book, you might add something that is not inside of the book.
Sure, sure. Okay, that sounds great. Well, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. As Mehmet so kindly mentioned, my name is Simran. I'm a son of San Antonio, born and raised there. Live now in New York City. You might hear some of our delightful sounds of honking and sirens in the background, especially because I live right next to one of the big hospitals, and COVID is spiking, and so there are a lot of ambulances around these days. Um, I'm very happy to share this book with you, and today's an especially exciting day because today the book was released in Japanese, and so that's not something I ever dreamed of, but I'm very pleased to see that happening. And I'll just give you a sense of why I decided to write this story and how I came about this particular story, and then I'll walk through the story itself, and then we can have a conversation. The short of it is, being born and raised in San Antonio, our family uh, was the only Sikh family wearing turbans in all of South Texas. And I remember being a boy in elementary school and going to bookstores and libraries and looking for books that had characters who looked like us. And it was so disappointing every single time to be told, there's nothing for you or about you. And I even remember one time asking a librarian at my school if there was anything, and she said, it's just not relatable. And she didn't mean that in a malicious or hateful way, but the message I got as a kid was that nobody cares about me. Nobody cares about my community. Our stories don't matter. Our people don't matter. Like, people don't care about us. And that was really painful for me as a kid. And I promised myself, when I grew up, if these books didn't exist, then I would write one myself. And so you can fast forward about 30 years. I'm living in New York. It's 2016, and my older daughter is born. And I go back to these same bookshelves and libraries and bookstores and look for children's books for my kids who can see some sort of positive representation of the people in their family. And I realized that nothing's changed, right? There's still nothing for them. And so that's when I really decided that I wanted to take on this project. I mean, I remembered my promise from when I was a kid to myself that I would write this book. I was trying to think of the right story, and within a few weeks, one of my running heroes came to New York City for a race. He had already set the record as the oldest person to ever run a marathon. He had run a marathon at the age of 100. I had been following his story for years. He actually inspired me to start running marathons. And so he comes to New York City, and I want to go meet him. I'd met him once before, but I had a chance to go spend some time with him. We spent about 2 hours together. And my daughter was 6 weeks old at the time, and he held her in his arms. He was 105 years old in 2016. And we talked for about 2 hours, and the more I listened to him, the more I just kept wishing that my daughter, my baby girl, could absorb everything he was saying. I mean, his life wisdom, his experiences, the values that he was talking about in terms of persistence and resilience and never giving up. I mean, that's just what I wanted for my daughter. And the other thing interesting that happened throughout that conversation was, I had identified with this man because he was a turban wearing Sikh who is an athlete. And I love that about him. And I felt like his story was my story. But the more I learned about him, the more I learned about experiences that I had never had myself. He had dealt with disability as a child. I learned about that. I had never really thought seriously about what that must be like. He talked about immigration, moving to a new country at the age of 81, and how isolating and lonely that was, how depressed he was. And I had never thought about that, even though my parents are immigrants. I'd never really given it serious thought because I never had to. He talked about ageism and what it's like to be older and have people assume that you're past your prime and that you can't learn new tricks and you have nothing to contribute to society. And I had never thought about that really either. And so all of these things that he was sharing about his life experience, I found them helping me connect with people that I hadn't really connected with before. they really helped me cultivate my own empathy. And that's when I realized this was the story I wanted to tell. Excuse me. So that was 2016, and I start writing his story. I did it with him because I really valued his opinion and wanted to do justice to his story. I wanted him to be proud of the product, and so we put together this book, beautifully illustrated and published by Penguin Random House, which is the world's biggest press. And so I mean, it's just been a dream, an absolute dream come true. So I'm happy to share the story with you, and we can have a conversation about anything. But I'll start just by sharing my screen, and I'll read at least a portion of it, and we can go from there. The book is called Fauja Singh Keeps Going, the true story of the oldest person to ever run a marathon. And one of my favorite parts of the book, and I'm happy to come back to it if you'd like, is a foreword that's written by, it's Fauja Singh's perspective. And at the bottom of the page, you'll see his signature there. It's in the Urdu script. It's actually because of his disability, he never got to go to school and he never got to learn how to read or write. And this is the only thing in the world he knows how to write. It's his name in the Urdu script. So I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to bring this into the book itself. It was a sweltering summer. Little Fauja Singh sat under the shade of a banyan tree in his village in Punjab, eating mangoes and watching the other children play. Fauja was smart and funny. He and his friends liked to play cards and marbles while sitting in a circle and telling jokes. But Fauja longed to join them when they ran and jumped. He longed to play hopscotch, to rescue a runaway cricket ball, or to run with a kite flying high across the sky. He wished he felt as strong as his name, which meant warrior lion. When he was very little, his parents worried that he might never walk. Month after month and year after year went by, but Fauja did not take a single step. Aunts and uncles, grandmas and grandpas shook their heads gravely and said, "It's too hard. He's too weak." But Fauja did not listen, and Fauja did not stop. Instead, every morning he would listen to his mother, who said, "You know yourself, Fauja, and you know what you're capable of. Today is a chance to do your best." Fauja practiced walking outside his family's hut each day, staying in the mud to soften every fall. He practiced and prayed for months. He could feel himself getting stronger inside and out. And then, a few days after Fauja's 5th birthday, a wonderful thing happened. He took one step, and another, then another, and another, and another. Fauja Singh was finally walking. Fauja's parents were proud that their son understood what he was capable of, and that he worked hard to achieve his goals. They were thrilled Fauja could walk because they knew it would make his life easier. His parents were so happy, they shared prayers of thanks and distributed prasad to the entire village. Once Fauja began to walk, his legs needed strengthening. He practiced walking around the banyan tree every day. Some bullies thought his legs looked like sticks, and they teased Fauja by calling him Danda. But Fauja did not listen, and Fauja did not stop. Though his legs were weak, Fauja's spirit was strong. As Fauja got bigger, it was time to go to school. But the school was miles away from his small village. There were no buses. Fauja's legs couldn't carry him all that distance, and they couldn't bring the school to him. So while Fauja's friends went to school, he got his education on the farm, learning to plant, plow, and pick all kinds of crops. "It's too hard. He's too weak," said the neighbors. But Fauja did not listen, and Fauja did not stop. He'd walk behind the buffaloes, planting seeds and getting stronger with each step. Fauja worked and worked and worked. He walked and walked and walked. He farmed and farmed and farmed. And when Fauja turned 15, the whole village witnessed a new wonder. Fauja could walk an entire mile. Fauja progressed by leaps and bounds, and he took many big steps over the next few years. He got married, he had children, and he even got his own farm. Fauja loved life in Punjab. He loved flying kites in the open fields with his children. He loved the excitement of a close cricket match played with friends. And he loved the joy that filled the village during the harvest festival of Vaisakhi. He taught his children how to farm. just like his father had taught him. And every morning he would tell his children, "You know yourselves and you know what you're capable of. Today is a chance to do your best." He cherished every step in his life's journey. As time passed, Fauja's children grew up and moved to places far away. Fauja, who was usually lively and energetic, grew sad and lonely, especially after his wife died. He missed his family and wanted to be with them. But to leave his village at the age of 81, to go live on the other side of the world, could Fauja do it? His friends were worried. "You're too old, Fauja," they said. "It's too hard for you to move away." But Fauja didn't listen and Fauja didn't stop. He knew it was time for him to take a step in a new direction. One day, Fauja got on an airplane for the first time and went to live with his family in England. It was cold in England, and almost everyone only spoke English. Fauja was used to having many friends, but here he felt like a stranger. His family was busy with school and work. Fauja found himself with nowhere to go and nothing to do. Fauja passed his days in the living room staring at the television. He had never been so miserable. As he was flipping channels one day, he saw something new. A whole lot of people were running around town. Was it a fire? An accident? No, Fauja realized. They were running just to run, and they all had big smiles on their faces. Fauja knew at once that he had to try this. He put on his shoes, then walked out the door. He took one step and another, then another and another and another. Fauja Singh was running. The wind flowed through his beard, and for the first time in a long while, a smile appeared on his face. After that day, there was no stopping Fauja. He began by running a little bit every morning, and as he got stronger, he ran faster and longer. And when he felt especially strong, he would even run again in the evenings before eating dal and roti with his family. In England, it was common to see people running for fun, but not many of them looked like Fauja Singh. Some people would stare and some would laugh, but Fauja did not let that bother him. He ran and ran through the streets and parks of England, getting better and better each day. He ran races and he ran for fun. He ran with his friends and he ran alone, always with a smile on his face. Fauja loved running. He liked the new friends he made. He enjoyed exploring the new country he now called home. And he loved how being outdoors reminded him of his childhood, of playing hopscotch and flying kites in the fields. It had been a long time since he felt this happy. More than anything, Fauja loved the challenge. He had always enjoyed pushing his limits, whether it was learning to walk, doing farm work, or moving to a new country. Now he was ready for his next challenge. He started training with a coach, Harminder Singh, who had run many marathons and had trained others to run marathons too. There was no looking back after that. Harminder and Fauja Singh ran together many times a week. After months of hard work, 89-year-old Fauja Singh became one of the oldest people to ever complete the 26.2-mile London Marathon. Fauja ran the London Marathon 5 more times after that, getting faster each year and setting new records each time. By this point, Fauja was famous. As people in England followed this man with a beard, turban, and disarming smile running great distances, they began to learn more about his Sikh background. Around this time, Fauja learned that some people in the United States were attacking Sikhs for how they looked. Fauja knew this was wrong and he wanted to help, but he wasn't sure how to share his message. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, he couldn't speak English, but he could run, and at once Fauja knew what he had to do. He decided to run the world's biggest marathon in New York City. By now, Fauja was 93 years old. Could he still run 26.2 miles? Many news reporters didn't think so. But Fauja did not listen, and Fauja did not stop. Every day he practiced with his coach. Every night he dreamed about running. And every morning he reminded himself of his mother's words. "You know yourself, Fauja, and you know what you're capable of. Today is a chance to do your best. The big race finally came on a chilly November day in 2003. Fauja Singh stood at the start line. He felt ready, knowing he had prepared as well as he could. He stretched anticipation and recited a prayer, envisioning what it would feel like to cross the finish line. Just then, someone shouted racist and hateful words at him. Other people joined in. Fauja brushed it off. He knew he had a strong spirit. He ran, one foot in front of the other, and then disaster. The tender blisters on the soles of his feet had burst, and he was in a world of pain. He kept going, limping to the finish line. He made it, but it was his slowest time ever. Fauja was so exhausted that he collapsed right after the race. Medics wanted to rush him into an ambulance and take him away to recover. But Fauja preferred to stay and recover in the company of his trainer and fellow runners. Fauja made it back to England, and for the first time in a long while, he was sad. Fauja had wanted to run fast and show the world what Sikhs could achieve. But he felt like his poor performance at the world's biggest marathon made him look weak, and that he had failed his Sikh sisters and brothers all over the world. Maybe they were right, said a voice in his mind. Maybe it is too hard. Maybe you are too weak. The voice made Fauja doubt himself for the first time in years, and it tried to convince him to quit running altogether. But Fauja did not listen. Inspired by his coach, he set a new goal for himself. He was going to be the first 100-year-old person to ever run a full marathon. Fauja ran every single day for years. He ran and ran. He practiced and practiced. He trained and trained. And when the day came, he knew he was ready. On October 16th, 2011, 100-year-old Fauja Singh lined up at the start for the Toronto Waterfront Marathon. He was so excited that it felt like an electric current was flowing through his body. He ran along the course and people joined him for a few miles at a time to show their support. He welcomed them with a smile, offering jokes to adults and high fives to children. As he ran, Fauja thought about all the things people had said he would never do. They said he couldn't walk, but he did. They said he couldn't farm, but he did. They thought he was too old to run, and yet here he was, running 26.2 miles at the age of 100. Fauja had never been more sure of himself. He hoped that children and adults everywhere would see him take on this difficult challenge and persevere with grace, something he'd learned through his faith. It took him 8 hours, but he finally did it. Fauja Singh finished the Toronto Marathon and set a new world record as the oldest person to ever run a marathon. He stood tall, holding tightly to his medal, with a proud smile on his face. He had faced many challenges in his 100 years, but Fauja Singh always kept going. So that's the end of this story, and on the final page we have some more information on Fauja Singh, a photo of him, and a list of all his records. So I'll stop sharing my screen and return to you, and happy to chat and discuss anything you'd like.
What a beautiful story.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So anyone has any questions? So it's really remind me that there's a Muslim scholar, you might know him, Bediüzzaman Said Nursi. He said, if you tell a healthy person 40 times that he is sick, he will become sick at the end of the day. So his mother, one sentence changed his whole life. I said he is enjoying all the moments. He's taking everything, not in rush, slowly, but enjoying every moment and never discouraging from the people's thought. Doesn't matter he is 5 years old or 80 years old. If people say something to him, he is not listening to them. He has one motto and he's following his motto all the time. I mean, I believe it is a big lesson for all of us. Doesn't matter how old are you, what we are doing, you're always capable to do something, and every morning is a new chance.
So this is a very impressive story, and the way that you shared with the kids, I mean, for the kids' age, it's more impressive. I mean, as impressive as the story itself, because I mean, I think there are not so many resources for the kids from different religious and cultural backgrounds. So most of them are like in the United States, especially, or in England, maybe. So most of the kids' books are based on the culture that we live in instead of our original background or original culture. So this is a great example. I mean, to reflect from your own religious and cultural background, to give an example that never give up, and then you still will be acknowledged as you are, with your own presence, with your own outlook, with your own ideas and beliefs and everything. So it's kind of making yourself accepted in the community and respected in the community as you are. So I believe this is a great story, and I will be happy to share it with my friends and even with the kids that I have around. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, it's very much, part of the vision here is to help our kids with religious and cultural literacy, learning about communities that are different from their own. I think that's important. And as a professor of religion, I find we don't do a good job of that, right? Like I get students coming in at the age of 18 and they know nothing. And when I was in San Antonio, I was teaching Islamic studies, nothing. Now I'm teaching Buddhist history in New York City. Same problem, right? Like we just don't make that a priority for our kids, and it sets them up for failure. So I think I'm right there with you that this is a really important thing for our kids. And even more important than that, I think, is how do we teach our kids? I mean, it feels more important than ever. How do we teach our kids to see the humanity in the people who are different from them? Like we have to start teaching them that early, that yes, we look different because of our skin color or our religious practices or our the way our hair is or whatever, right? There are all sorts of differences, but that shouldn't obstruct them from first connecting with people as who they are, and then we can start learning about these differences. So that's part of the project here, is to transform the way we think about difference as not something that divides us, but actually something that we can celebrate.
So let me ask something. What do you think? How is it going to be easy if I am not learning, and how am I going to teach to my kids? So if I'm an ignorant person, so I don't read, I don't listen, I don't leave my comfort zone, then so how am I going to teach my kids? And if they're always around me or people like me, do you have any suggestion or any thought about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, part of the answer is to learn, right? Like we all have to do the work of learning ourselves so that we can teach our kids. But part of the answer is actually, just knowing more isn't what's going to make us better people. I think for the past 20, 30 years, especially, our culture has put an emphasis on, if we just have more educated people, then we'll be better human beings, we'll be less racist. And I mean, look at our country right now, like we're more educated than we've ever been. And like,
But
we're in a total disastrous situation in terms of racism. And so there has to be more that we're doing, and it can't just be this idea that, and this is what I grew up with too. Like if people just knew that I was a Sikh, then they would treat me better. It's not true, right? Like we have all sorts of people that we know exactly who they are, and we treat them terribly. And so what we need to really focus on is giving our kids the values of, what does it look like to treat every single person with dignity? What does it look like to honor people's differences and their different experiences, right? Like, so for me, as an example, I had never really thought about the ways in which I don't truly value disability. It's not something that ever really crossed my mind until Fauja Singh's story. It's not that I was being disrespectful to people with disabilities, because I still had those frameworks and values to see the dignity of everyone. But now that I've seen a bit more through the story of Fauja Singh, now I can be even more sensitive to that. So I think that's the kind of thing we should be focused on, right? Like, let's just learn to treat everyone with respect as the core principle. And then as we meet different kinds of people in our lives, it becomes a lot easier to be open and receptive to those kinds of differences without personally feeling threatened, or without feeling like we need to claim that we're better than someone else, right? We don't need to enter into any sort of supremacist outlook because of that. So yeah, that's my general reflection.
I think if you go to the playground with your kids, it doesn't matter for them who they are playing. They can play someone different than them. But when we go to the playground, these kids, they come with their parents, but we are hesitating to talk to their parents. So as an adult, I guess we had fears, and it's really hard to overcome all of these fears. Yes, learning is one suggestion. What else we can do? So I am 50 years old, and I don't like reading. I don't like the watching. But what's going to happen to me? How am I going to overcome to my fears?
I have a question, Simran. Do you think this book is also for us, like brown parents who define success in a way and refuse to accept our children, how they are, you know, like you say, I don't really mean in terms of disability, even, I guess the definition of success is so like limited among brown parents, right? I don't know if you would agree with that.
No, absolutely agree with that. That the part of the, I mean, there are multiple ways in addressing that sort of frame of success among brown parents, and I think one of them is to say the ways in which we think about who our heroes can be are way too limited, right? Like even just like seeing someone who's this old as a hero, like think about how transformative that is for the way that our kids are taught about what their heroes look like. I mean, he's an immigrant, like, or immigrants can be heroes too. He has dealt with disability. Our heroes can do that too, right? So I think that's one thing, but also, you know, success doesn't need to be defined. And I think I learned this throughout Fauja Singh's story and the refrain throughout the book. You know yourself, you know what you're capable of. Today is a chance to do your best. Like that's success. Success is not, and I think people who deal with racism have to learn this through their own, you know, lives at an early age, that you can't rely on other people to tell you you're successful or that you're doing a good job or that they're proud of you, right? Because if we're waiting for that moment, we're never going to be happy. Fauja Singh had to learn from a young age, and I had to learn, and you've had to learn from a young age, and our kids have to learn from a young age, right? That this is something we need to do. So anyway, I totally agree with your point there, and think I think it's exactly right.
Thank you very much for the great sharing this great story. And when I was listening, this is just an example. And as you also mentioned, maybe we need to find out more of those type of examples. Your example was an immigrant and an old person, but especially the immigrants or any form of minority groups, they need to see examples in the stories and in different forms in order to inspire and get motivated. Like today I was reading the news, Dr. Fauci is saying in the COVID-19 vaccine work, there was an African-American lady work also in this one. So what he was trying to do is he's trying to convince the African-American community to get vaccinated. And to find that, to do that, actually, he is pointing out that African-American scientists work on this. So it is a trustable vaccine kind of thing. So this is kind of serves similar purpose that you shared the story. And I think we have a lot of responsibility to share and to find out those type of good stories to share, either with our kids and as well as new coming people who are trying to getting used to the United States or in any country they are living.
Well, unfortunately, Black people have this history of being inoculated with stuff and killing them. And we will get the vaccine when it gets to our time to get it. But I know lots of people who say, no way. And so I'm thinking this virus is going to last very, very long time.
So what's the next plan, Simran?
So we're trying to go, well, I'll show you the exciting thing from today. Let me see if I can pull it up for you. Is the book coming out in Japanese? So I'll show you the cover. I mean, it's just
That'll
fun.
help us.
Everything. Let me see if I can do this.
Any movies or cartoon plans?
Yeah, so we're working on getting this developed as an animated film. And so that's a big project for us. I have some studios interested, working with some writers and producers. So that's really exciting. I'm working on an adult book, actually. That's the next book I'm working on, which is drawing from Sikh wisdom to think about how to deal with the frustrations of our time. You know, how do you truly continue to care about people when they hate you? You know, how do you love your neighbor in those tough moments? That's the kind of thing that I'm writing about and drawing from Sikhism there. So that's the next book. And the next children's book is thinking about identity and nationalism and borders. So a lot of, I mean, really inspired by the family separations and how do we talk to our kids about that? I've been trying to talk to my own kids about that sort of thing. And so it's a very difficult book to write, just like this one was. But I think it'll be worth it so that it opens up some important conversations.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry a lot of people didn't show up.
So we are going to post it on Facebook and YouTube, hopefully, and I'm going to send them the recording as well. They didn't join the live conversation, but at least they can listen and watch. So did you receive any negative feedback about the book? Or any negative comments?
I don't think so. I mean,
No.
not yet. Nothing so far. We were just named one of NPR's best books of 2020. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Nothing really negative so far. And I think, I mean, how can anyone be upset about this beautiful man's story? So
Yeah.
he's been happy with it, and yeah.
I believe it's not about the book, but it's about, as you mentioned before, it's about the identity or the way the one who wrote the book. Someone with the turban, he wrote a book, and it is now in NPR's one of the best books. So in a racist way, I was asking if you receive any negative comments.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I haven't really gotten anything negative yet, but I'm sure, you know, let's say it turns into a film and, you know, it comes out on, you know, their TV commercials or something, then I imagine people may have things to say about, you know, exposing our kids to that. So yeah, I think it's the kind of thing where the bigger it becomes, then the more hate you attract. And so maybe in a way I'll welcome the negativity because it'll mean that it's reaching more people.
And also I feel kind of maybe you should write the adult version of this story as well. just to inspire like the immigrant people. Don't limit yourself. And
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's what I keep coming back to, it that I myself have learned so much through the story personally. Like it's really changed my life knowing this man, and even some of the examples I've given around. I mean, I'll give another one. Um, my I had a real bias. I didn't even know this around literacy. I had always thought that people who were intelligent and deserving of respect were people who knew how to read and write. And all of a sudden, I meet this man who I admire, and I find out that he doesn't read or write. And I'm like, oh, now what do I do? Like, I think he's intelligent. I think he's an amazing person. So there's so many assumptions that this challenges, so many lessons, but of course that piece of inspiration that like you can do anything, and there's no need to give up on your life, right?
Right.
I'm so inspired by his story, and so yeah, I think you're right that there's a lot to it.
Any questions, comments?
I was just going to say, I need to find a way to introduce this book to our walking club, which is international. It's the International Volkssport Association. And we actually have walking marathons, one in San Antonio every February. And most of our members tend to be older, some of them as old as in their 90s. And I think this would be a huge inspiration, about your persistence story to that community. And I'll figure out a way to publicize it through those channels. And one question you didn't answer, is he still alive?
He is still alive. Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
He's 109 now. Living in London still. He's not running anymore, but he's still walking about 10 miles a day.
Okay.
So he's still keeping his nutritious diet, which he will talk to me he'll talk to anyone about his diet who will listen. He actually, there's a portion in the book where I refer to what he eats. That's because he insisted that I mention it at some point in the book. So he's so proud of how healthy he eats, and he really wants other people to eat healthy. But yeah, he's still
Can
alive.
you tell us about his nutrition a little bit? What does he eat?
Yeah, so no desserts, but lots of fruit. Mangoes especially, which is why the mangoes appear on the inside cover. And every day, at least once, but sometimes twice, he eats dal and roti, which is what I say in the book that he's eating with his family. That's the lentils and the chapatis. But yeah, that's his favorite meal, and it's been his favorite meal since childhood.
Wow.
Well, you said he walks 10 miles. It's a huge number. I mean, how many of us can walk 10 miles here?
No.
So we learn from the book, to be old is not about the age. It's how you feel.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing that's been most exciting. I mean, there are very few people you meet in your life who you put on a pedestal and then you meet them and they're exactly how you want them to be. I mean, he's so joyful and kind and funny. Like, he's got this love for life. I mean, he will say he's still alive because of all of his exercise and his diet, which I think is partially true, but I think it's his love for life that really keeps him going every day. So that's what I want to bottle up and have for myself. It's just such an incredible thing to witness.
With his beard and turban, has he ever acted as the Sikh Santa? Is it possible?
I haven't seen that, but I have to say, there was one year, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when he first ran the marathon. I actually, for Halloween, dressed up as him, like before I had an idea of writing this book. So I have to find those photos at some point and start somewhere.
So to respect each of us time, and we have just 5 minutes left. I know Simran, he's busy. He's running from meeting to meeting, Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting.
Okay. Thank you so much. Again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate it. And
What a lovely book.
thank you very much. Thank Thank you, Mehmet, for organizing.
Thank you. As always. Yes, I hope we can host you in person when everything goes back to normal. So it's not going to be normal as we had the normal. So it's a different normal. But so we learn a lot from this pandemic. Myself, I learned a lot. I believe everybody also they learn. So we will be aware of people that are not the same, or it's not in terms of the color or religious belief, but there's some other people also we need to take care of them, and we need to be aware of them. Thank you, Simran.
All right, thank you all.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
But if this was in person, I may not be able to make it, so I'm glad that it is Zoom.
That's true.